Punishment withdrawal. When your partner suddenly goes cold after an argument, stops all physical affection, and makes it clear you're not getting anywhere near them until you apologize or give in, that's sexual withholding as punishment. They're not just upset, they're strategically removing intimacy to make you feel the consequences of disagreeing with them. And it works because humans are wired to seek reconnection after conflict. When someone weaponizes that need, they're essentially training you to avoid disagreement altogether. This pattern shows up most clearly in how long the freeze lasts and what it takes to end it. We're not talking about someone needing space to cool down for a few hours. This is days or weeks of coldness that only thaws when you've bent to their will. They might still share a bed with you, still live in the same house, but every inch of physical warmth gets withdrawn until you comply. The message becomes crystal clear. Step out of line, lose access to intimacy. What's happening psychologically is a power play disguised as emotional processing. The person withholding isn't protecting their feelings. They're leveraging your desire for connection to control your behavior. It creates a dynamic where one person holds all the cards and the other is constantly trying to earn back basic affection. Over time, you stop bringing up concerns, stop expressing needs, stop being yourself because the price of authenticity is sexual and emotional exile. The really damaging part is how it erodes trust in the relationship itself. Intimacy is supposed to be a place of safety and connection. When it becomes a privilege that gets revoked for bad behavior, sex stops being about mutual desire and becomes a tool of control. You end up walking on eggshells not because you're afraid of conflict, but because you're afraid of being cut off from the person you love. Obligation, framing. Some people create this running tab in the relationship where everything they do becomes a reason you owe them sex. They paid for dinner, so you should be grateful. They watched your favorite show, so now it's payback time. They helped with housework, so physical intimacy is the expected compensation. What they're doing is turning your relationship into a transaction where sex is currency and you're always in debt. This isn't about occasional playful negotiation or lighthearted teasing. This is systematic framing where normal relationship contributions get positioned as sacrifices that require sexual repayment. The language gives it away. After everything I do for you, or I never ask for much, or is it really too much to expect? They're manufacturing guilt to manufacture compliance. And the guilt works because most people do want to be generous partners and responsive lovers. The psychological mechanism here is debt creation, where none should exist. Healthy relationships operate on genuine generosity and mutual care, not tallied exchanges. When someone consistently frames their basic partnership behaviors as deserving sexual reward, they're removing your ability to desire them freely. You're not engaging in intimacy because you want to. You're engaging because you've been convinced you have no choice without being a bad partner. What makes this particularly insidious is how it masquerades as communication about needs. They'll say they're just expressing what they want, that they're being honest about feeling rejected, but there's a massive difference between sharing feelings and creating obligation. One invites connection, the other demands payment. And when sex becomes something you owe rather than something you share, desire dies completely. Performance shaming. They criticize how you touch them, compare you to previous partners, or make comments about your body during the most vulnerable moments you share. This is weaponizing intimacy itself by turning the bedroom into a performance review where you're constantly falling short. The goal isn't to improve your sex life together. The goal is to keep you insecure, trying harder, and grateful for whatever scraps of approval they throw your way. This pattern often starts subtle. A comment here about how their ex did something differently. A suggestion there that feels more like criticism. Maybe they sigh or seem disappointed, and when you ask what's wrong, they say nothing's wrong, but their body language screams otherwise. Over time, these moments accumulate into a crushing weight of sexual anxiety where you're more focused on getting it right than actually connecting with your partner. The psychology behind this is dominance through degradation. By keeping you insecure about your sexual adequacy, they maintain a power advantage. You become the perpetual student to their expert, the one who needs to improve while they sit in judgment. It's control through manufactured inadequacy. And because sex involves such vulnerability, these wounds cut deeper than almost any other form of criticism in a relationship. What happens to people trapped in this dynamic is they start avoiding intimacy altogether. Not because they don't want connection, but because every encounter has become an evaluation they're afraid of failing. The bedroom transforms from a place of pleasure and closeness into a space of performance anxiety and shame. Some people spend years trying to be good enough, never realizing that the standards were designed to be unattainable. Conditional affection. Your partner only touches you when they want sex. No casual hand-holding, no spontaneous hugs, no affection without an agenda. Every kiss is a prelude, every cuddle session an expectation. They've trained you to understand that physical warmth only happens on their terms when they're interested in something more. This creates a brutal equation in in your mind. Any affection you receive comes with strings attached. So you start avoiding their touch, not because you don't want affection, but because you can't handle the disappointment of warmth that only exists as foreplay. You learn to read every gesture as either a demand or nothing at all. The middle ground of simple, non-sexual connection completely disappears from your relationship. What's really happening is operant conditioning applied to human intimacy. They're teaching you that closeness and sex are inseparable, that one can't exist without the other. This serves their control because it means you can't get your basic human needs for touch and affection met unless you're also willing to be sexual. Your access to warmth becomes conditional on your availability for sex. The long-term damage shows up in how you relate to affection itself. You become hypervigilant about touch, always scanning for ulterior motives. Even after leaving this relationship, you might struggle to accept simple affection from future partners without suspicion. The conditioning runs deep because it exploited one of your most fundamental needs, the need to be touched and held without everything becoming sexual. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, I post content like this regularly. I'd appreciate if you subscribed. Thanks. Replacement threats. They don't directly say they'll cheat, but the implications hang in every conversation about your sex life. Comments about how their needs aren't being met, observations about couples who broke up over sexual incompatibility, mentions of people at work who find them attractive. They're creating a constant undercurrent of fear that if you don't comply sexually, they'll find someone who will. This is coercion through manufactured insecurity. They're not making explicit threats because that would be too obvious. Instead, they're planting seeds of doubt and anxiety, making you believe that your relationship hangs by a thread, and that thread is your sexual availability. The message becomes clear without ever being stated directly: keep me satisfied or lose me. The psychological warfare here operates on your attachment fears. Most people in committed relationships have some level of anxiety about being left or replaced. When a partner deliberately activates those fears around sex, they're exploiting your vulnerability for control. You end up saying yes, not because you want to, but because you're terrified of the alternative they keep hinting at. What makes this particularly damaging is the plausible deniability they maintain. If you confront them, they'll act confused or hurt that you'd think they were threatening you. They were just sharing their feelings, just being honest about their needs, just making an observation. But the pattern is unmistakable. Every conversation leaves you feeling more anxious about your security in the relationship, more convinced that your worth as a partner hinges entirely on sexual compliance. Behavior reinforcement. Notice how they're suddenly interested in sex right after you do something they wanted. You agree to skip plans with friends, and that night they initiate. You backed down from a boundary, and suddenly they're affectionate. You're being trained like a lab rat, learning that compliance brings reward and resistance brings coldness. This isn't a loving relationship, it's behavioral conditioning. The pattern becomes clear when you map their sexual interest against your compliance with their preferences. When you're agreeable and accommodating, intimacy flows freely. When you assert yourself or maintain boundaries, they become distant and unavailable. They're not even necessarily doing this consciously. Many people fall into this pattern because it gives them what they want without having to explicitly demand it. What's happening is the weaponization of intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful tools in behavioral psychology. By occasionally rewarding certain behaviors with affection and sex, they create a stronger conditioning than if they rewarded every time. You become hyper-aware of what brings connection and what brings withdrawal. Your behavior starts revolving around earning their interest rather than expressing your authentic self. The cost of this dynamic is the death of genuine desire on both sides. You're not being intimate because you want them. You're being intimate because you've learned it comes with better treatment. And they're not being intimate because they desire you. They're being intimate because you've performed correctly. What's left is a hollow transaction where nobody's actually connecting. Everyone's just playing their assigned role in a control system disguised as a relationship. Exposure, punishment. They threaten to tell others about your private, intimate life whenever you're not complying with what they want. Maybe they hint at sharing details with friends, family, or coworkers about your sexual preferences, bedroom struggles, or physical insecurities you've confided. They're holding your vulnerability hostage, using the most private parts of your relationship as leverage to control your behavior outside the bedroom. This pattern often starts small. A comment made to a friend that crosses a line, then an apology that doesn't quite feel sincere. A joke at a family gathering that reveals something you never agreed to share. When you object, they minimize it, tell you you're being too sensitive, that it wasn't that serious. But the message lands clearly. They can expose you whenever they choose, and that threat keeps you compliant. What's happening psychologically is blackmail disguised as carelessness or humor. They're demonstrating that your privacy exists only at their discretion. The information you shared in trust, the vulnerabilities you revealed in intimacy, these now belong to them as weapons they can deploy whenever you step out of line. It's a profound betrayal of the fundamental safety that intimacy requires. The damage shows up in how you start censoring yourself during vulnerable moments. You hold back information, hide your desires, Avoid sharing fears because you've learned that anything you say can become ammunition later. Intimacy requires trust, and they've systematically destroyed that trust by proving your private life is never actually private if they decide otherwise. You're left in a relationship where you can never fully let your guard down because the person closest to you is also the person most capable of using your secrets against you. Gatekeeping access. Your partner rejects every advance you make but never initiates themselves. You're always the one reaching out, always the one being turned down, always the one left feeling unwanted. They've set up a system where they control all access to intimacy, and that system is designed to keep you in a constant state of rejection while maintaining the appearance that they're just not in the mood. This isn't someone with a lower libido honestly navigating mismatched desire. This is strategic rejection paired with zero reciprocal effort. If they occasionally initiated, if they sometimes said yes, if they showed any interest in meeting you halfway, that would be a couple working through different needs. But when someone consistently rejects while never reaching out themselves, they're not managing their sexuality, they're managing your sense of worth. The power dynamic this creates is brutal. You're constantly in pursuit, constantly being denied, constantly questioning your desirability. They hold all the cards because they're the gatekeeper and the gate stays closed. Your self-esteem starts eroding because repeated rejection, even from one person, rewires how you see yourself. You begin to believe you're fundamentally unwanted. What makes this a control tactic rather than just a mismatch is the refusal to engage with the problem. When you bring it up, they deflect or get defensive or turn it around on you for being too demanding. They won't discuss solutions, won't acknowledge the pattern, won't take any responsibility for the dynamic they've created, because acknowledging it would mean losing the power advantage, and the power advantage is the entire point. Impossible standards. Everything has to be perfect before they'll consider intimacy. The house must be spotless, the kids must be asleep, their mood must be exactly right, the timing must align with some mysterious internal calculation you're never privy to. They've created a system where the conditions for sex are so specific and demanding that intimacy almost never happens. And when you point this out, they act like you're the unreasonable one for not understanding their needs. This is control through a perpetually moving goalposts. You clean the house, but now they're too tired from a long day. You plan a romantic evening, but now they're stressed about work. You wait for the perfect moment they described, but suddenly there's a new requirement they never mentioned before. The pattern reveals itself in how the standards keep shifting to ensure the answer stays no. The psychology behind this is justification for total control over sexual frequency while placing the blame elsewhere. They're not rejecting you. The circumstances just aren't right. They're not withholding intimacy. They just have needs that aren't being met. By externalizing the responsibility onto endless changing conditions, they avoid accountability while maintaining complete control over if and when sex happens in your relationship. What this does to partners over time is create learned helplessness. You stop trying because you've learned that no effort is ever enough. The standards aren't designed to be met. They're designed to give cover for withholding while making you feel like the failure is yours. You didn't create the right environment. You didn't read their needs correctly. You didn't try hard enough. Meanwhile, they've successfully avoided intimacy while convincing you it's your fault. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.